Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. My name is Harshmeet Singh and I welcome you all to a beginning of a new initiative. An initiative where we will be discussing with you certain hacks for the prelims examination of 2022. In this limited series, I will be discussing with you certain mind maps, certain mnemonics, memory tricks, and some other tips that you have to keep in mind while solving those tricky prelims questions that can make all the difference in your entire result. This is a limited series which will be released on the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS every Friday till the Prelims 2022 examination. So make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS, and if you have not liked the video till now, do hit the like button. In this first episode, I will be discussing with you certain important international groupings and the member nations of these groups. How to remember these member nations, some mnemonics, that is short forms that will help you in memorizing that important information. Most of these groupings have been asked by the UPSC in their prelims examination in one way or the other, and I will show you certain examples of those questions in the end as well. Now, some of these mnemonics you might already be familiar with, while some of these mnemonics may be new to you. Either way, make sure that you read them and you revise them to make sure that when the time comes to apply that knowledge in the prelims examination, you are well aware of how to solve these. Now, the first group that we will discuss is the G7. After that, we'll take up the G8 and G20. Now, G7 and G8 as such are those groups which are not very difficult to remember. G20 on the other hand can be extremely tricky because it has 20 member nations. But let's try and see if we can make it easier for you to remember these nations or not. First, let's start with the G7, the group of 7 powerful nations in the world. For this, you just have to remember JU'S with GF. Now, whatever tricks I'm telling you, you have to focus on the capital letters. The capital letters are the ones that are indicating to you the initial letter of a member country. So, JU'S with GF signifies Japan, US, Italy, Canada, England, Germany, and France. Again, because with is written here in small letters, it does not signify any country. So make sure that you focus on the capital letters only. To jump from G7 to G8, you just have to add Russia here. So JU'S with GF becomes JU'S with Russian GF, and you are good to go. That is Japan, US, Italy, Canada, England, Russia, Germany, and France. This is how you can remember these member nations of G7 and G8. Now comes the big one. Let's see if you can remember G20. Now, in order to remember the G20 nations, I'm giving you two options. You can go ahead with any one that you prefer. The first option is more suitable if you're a Hindi speaking student. You can remember the sentence called Guruji Sita ab SSC FCI mein job karti hai. Again, focus only on the capital letters. The second option I'm giving you is Sirs, that is me, beautiful magics just see. The beautiful does not have an L in it. Apart from that, the sentence is Sirs, beautiful magics just see. Focus only on the capital letters and you would be good to go. Let's see how. Let's focus on the first clue. G stands for Germany, U stands for USA, R here stands for Russia, the second U stands for United Kingdom. Similarly, JI stands for Japan and India. SITA stands for Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, Australia. AB stands for Argentina, Brazil, so on and so forth, and it ends with ME. The similar trick can be used for the second statement as well, depending upon whichever you find more suitable, depending upon whichever you find is easier for you to remember, just go ahead with that. Also, with the mnemonics, remember, just remembering the mnemonics might not be good enough because you need to have at least a certain basic idea about the member nations. I'll give you an example how. There was a question asked about the G20 nations only in the prelims examination a few years back, where you had 4 options and you had to choose which of these nations. Every option also had 4 nations. And UPSC was asking you which of these options has all the nations as members of G20. Now the confusion here starts because see, the letter S Now you don't know the letter S signifies which country, because S stands for South Africa also, it stands for South Korea as well, it stands for Saudi Arabia as well, but on the other hand it stands for Singapore as well. Singapore in itself is a developed nation. Then how do you know that Singapore is not this S and this S signifies other countries? For that you do need to have at least a certain bit of idea. So these mnemonics or mind maps might not really help you to become a champion from zero, but it will be the last block that you require for your preparation. So make sure that you remember this mnemonic and revise it multiple times, and it will be extremely helpful for you in the longer run. The next organization that we will discuss is the Arctic Council. Now, Arctic Council is not an organization that is a part of our daily discourse, especially in India. We don't really talk about it. It's pretty far from India. India is not even a member, but it has been asked in the UPSC examination in the past in some form. That is why it becomes relevant for us. It is even more relevant because in the Arctic Council, you have US and Russia both as members. Arctic anyways is a region which has been the hotbed of multiple controversies because both Russia, US and other of these nations have been trying to extract resources from that region. So it's always important to remember the members of the Arctic Council. Now I'm giving you two options here, just like the G20 part. You can choose whichever is more comfortable for you. The first option is nations are fighting for Arctic since their fund is at risk. Risk is RISC. Again, focus only on the capital letters. Or the second option, the shorter version is Russia's fund is Canada. Russia anyway is short of fund right now, so Russia's fund is Canada. Let's see how. Russia, FUND stands for Finland, USA, Norway and Denmark. IS stands for Iceland and Sweden. And then we have our own Canada. Either of these, whichever you find it easier, make sure you remember and you apply this knowledge when the time comes. Similarly, the next grouping is ASEAN. Now, ASEAN is a group that I'm sure all of you would be familiar with, and many of you would already remember the 10 member nations of ASEAN. But what happens is with these kind of nations and in a pressure situation like the prelims examination, usually you tend to remember 8 or 9 of them, but you start slipping away in the last nation. That is why it's always handy to have a trick with you so that you can remember all 10. Now let's see how you can remember the 10 members of the ASEAN. Again, I'm giving you two options. First option that you can take is MBBS Clip TV. Over here, do remember, we are using Burma as the name of Myanmar. As you know, Myanmar is the same country as Burma. Burma was an old name. So MBBS Clip TV, or the other one can be BP climbs watching TV. Blood pressure climbs while watching TV. Again, the same mnemonic, the same initials, they will redirect you to the same set of countries, such as B stands for Burma, P stands for Philippines, and then Cambodia, Laos, and then I stands for Indonesia. Then after that, we have Malaysia, Burma, we have Singapore, TV stands for Thailand and Vietnam. So either of the mnemonics, whichever you find it more easier for you. Some of you might already be familiar with these mnemonics and some of you might find it very new. If you are someone who is reading it for the first time, it might not be the easiest way for you to remember the first time. But trust me, if you read it 5 or 6 times, it will become very, very easy for you to remember this in your mind. The next group is BIMSTEC. Another grouping of our region only, another group that has been asked by the UPSC in the prelims examination. A group that India specifically has been focusing on quite a lot in the past few years because we are seeing it as an alternative to the SAARC group, where Pakistan is acting as a stumbling block, and that is why we are shifting our focus towards the BIMSTEC nations. Now, although BIMSTEC is a group of nations that mainly surround the Bay of Bengal, but there are a few exceptions like Nepal, Bhutan, which are landlocked nations, but still had been given this privilege to be a part of this group. To remember the BIMSTEC nations, again, there are two options. First, MBBS NIT. Second, Mint's Big Bubblegum. Again, focus only on the capital letters. MINTS Mints, that is Myanmar. I stands for India, N stands for Nepal, T stands for Thailand, S stands for Sri Lanka, then B and B, that is Bhutan and Bangladesh. Or the first option, whichever you find more comfortable. The next grouping similarly is India's land neighbors. Now you have been seeing India's map all along ever since you were a kid. It's not that difficult to remember who are the nations with which we share a land border. But what we are doing here is we are discussing border nations with which India shares the border from the largest to the smallest, so in a decreasing order. That question also has been asked in the examination in the prelims part. For that, just remember Bachpan MBA. So in Bachpan, BA stands for Bangladesh. That is the country with which we share the largest border. Second is China. Then PA, that is Pakistan. Then N, that is Nepal. Then Myanmar, Bhutan, and Afghanistan. That is how you can remember from the largest to the smallest the land border that India shares with the other countries in our neighborhood. Jumping on to the next organization, that is a Gulf Cooperation Council, that is a GCC, group of nations with which India has fairly good relations, group of nations where a lot of Indians go and work, and a group of nations from which India exports a lot of crude oil, gas, etc. Now, how to remember the GCC? That is, again, two options. See, I'm being very considerate to you. Whichever option you find better, you can go ahead with that. The first is status quo back. Status quo means you have to make sure that the situation is as it is not changing. So either you can go with status quo back. Remember, we are only focusing on the capital letters. Or the second option can be Qatar, bus, okay. Okay. So the first is status quo back. S, Saudi Arabia, QUO, that is Qatar, UAE and Oman, and BK. BK is Bahrain and Kuwait. Similarly, the second option will give you the same solution. At the first instance, these mnemonics might not sound to be the easiest way to remember, but in the long run, trust me, they can be extremely helpful if you revise them multiple times. The next group, SARC, which I sincerely hope that all of you remember, even without this mnemonics. But even if you do need help for SARC as well, the easiest mnemonic to remember SARC is MBBS Spain. Maldives, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and then PAIN. That is Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Nepal. So MBBS Spain can be a perfect mnemonic to remember the SARC group of nations. Then we have the SCO, that is a Shanghai Cooperation Organization, another organization where India is a member now, another organization which India had been focusing on quite a lot before the pandemic especially. We were very, very eager about making a contribution in the SCO. Now, how to remember the SCO nations? These are mainly the Central Asian nations, Russia, China, India, and Pakistan. But to remember it better, again, the good way to remember is India to Pakistan on a truck. The truck here is with double K at the end. So India to Pakistan on a truck. India, Pakistan, and then TRUC double K. That stands for Tajikistan, Russia, Uzbekistan, China, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. The tricky part here is that amongst the Central Asian nations, Turkmenistan is not a member. So don't confuse Tajikistan with Turkmenistan. That will be the only problem that you can have even without the mnemonic, because you know for SCO, it is the Central Asian nations, Russia, China, India, and Pakistan. So India to Pakistan on a truck with a double K can be a good way to remember SCO. Then NATO. Now NATO is one of the most difficult ones in my opinion. In fact, even when I was making this mnemonic, I remember thinking it's extremely difficult to remember, but because NATO is so much in the news right now with all that is happening in Russia, Ukraine, NATO being at the center of it, at least it deserves one try from our side, that at least let's try and remember the member nations. If we can't remember a few, that is fine, but at least let's try from our end. What if the ones that we remember, they are the ones that are asked? So let's not leave it, let's try and remember. So for that, what I've done is, I have given you a mnemonic which you can remember, and you can see if it will help you in remembering the names of these nations or not. The mnemonic is, again, focus only on the capital letters. Cute child scrambling flunks. Flunks means to push by a very hard force. So cute child scrambling flunks. No parents, brother says play. That's what brothers do when parents are not around. So again, let's only focus on the capital letters. Cute child scrambling flunks, no parent, brother says play. Let's start. CUTE, Canada, United Kingdom, Turkey, Estonia. Child, CHILD, that is Croatia, Hungary, Italy, Latvia. Then Denmark. Scrambling, that is Spain, Czech Republic, Romania, Albania, Montenegro. Then B for Belgium. Then we have Luxembourg, Iceland, Norway, and Germany. Flunks, that is France, Lithuania, United States of America, Netherlands, Greece, and Slovakia. And then comes the part of no parents. So North Macedonia, which is the latest member to join the NATO, and Portugal. Brother says play, that is Bulgaria, Slovenia, and Poland. Not the easiest one to remember, but at least now you have a way that you can at least try to remember the NATO nations as well. Because otherwise, there was only one option, that is just to keep on remembering and just try to mug it up all. But now at least you have a way in which you can try and remember this. Hopefully that will be helpful for you. Now, let me give you an example of what question has been asked and how can you actually take help of this mnemonics, the ones that we just discussed, to solve those questions. In 2016, this question was, which of the following is not a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council? Gulf Cooperation Council. Remember? We just discussed about it, right? Now, the options are Iran, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Kuwait. Just try and remember what did we discuss about the Gulf Cooperation Council. Remember, I gave you two options. One was status quo back. Remember, status quo back. If you want, I can just take it back to you here. See, these are the ones that we discussed. Status quo back or Qatar bus okay. Either one that you have to remember. Now, even if you don't remember all these, let's see the options right now. In the options, at least you can be sure that there was no I letter. There was no word that was starting with I at least. So even if you have to make an educated guess, you can go with Iran. That Iran does not really seem to be a member, because in the mnemonics that we made, the mnemonics that we studied, I was nowhere present. These kind of questions you will see in your prelims examination, at least one or two of these questions every single year. And those one or two questions can make all the difference if you are prepared with these mnemonics. This is it for episode number 1. I really hope it was helpful for you, and it will be even more helpful if you revise it multiple times. In episode number 2 of next week, we will be discussing about important water bodies around the world, the nations that surround those water bodies, and how exactly can you remember those. Thank you so much for watching the video.